station where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
So I just wanted to discuss a recent experience I had watching the film Star Wars Last Jedi. So this is a relatively new film that came out in late 2017. I think it was December. And I didn't really get around to seeing it straight away, largely because I wasn't really confident it was going to be that great, really. But I gave it a go this week. And I think a lot of the time with films when they come out, I've learnt over the years to never really fall for the hype. So I didn't really go along with the hype for this one. I just sort of watched it, didn't really know what to expect, didn't read up on it. But I'm a big Star Wars fan. And have to say, I felt compelled to put this out because I don't think it's really any news to say that this film was extremely controversial. It's felt to me like it was almost a derailment of a franchise. It didn't feel like it was a Star Wars film, first and foremost. It's kind of felt like it was almost an attempt to appropriate something and mould it for an agenda, perhaps. Don't necessarily know. But I think there was an extreme backlash for this film, and I say from the outset now, going to obviously provide some spoilers for the film. So if you haven't seen the film and you don't really want to know certain spoilers, then maybe don't give this a listen. So with the original Star Wars films, there was a real sense of there being some sort of spiritual element to the underlying story, some otherworldly nature to the power of the Force, this concept that binded the universe together, binded each consciousness together. And ultimately, I think George Lucas' message was quite a spiritual one that came from, very inspired by Buddhism and all sorts of Eastern traditions, and that comes across in A New Hope, and probably it's there. I mean, it's definitely there in the prequels, which, although aren't particularly popular, I maintain they're not as bad as many make out, and they have actually had a bit of a revisit recently by many, and I don't think people are quite as negative about those films now. Certainly, that seems to be the trend I'm seeing. But the thing with The Last Jedi, so The Force Awakens obviously came out in 2015, which was the first Disney reboot since George Lucas sold the franchise to Disney. And it wasn't bad. I mean, to me it felt like a kind of pastiche of Star Wars, and I think that's how many felt. I know it's how my brother Peter felt. It just wasn't. It was perfectly entertaining, but I don't know. It left me a little cold, really. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but I enjoyed it enough to see it twice, actually. So that kind of was something that I don't often do in the cinema. Then Rogue One came out, which was the sort of every other year film, which is Disney's plan, and it was sort of like an offshoot film. I didn't mind it, but I sort of felt that it was a bit CGI heavy, and I didn't really like the way they used Peter Cushing. They created a Peter Cushing CGI character. I kind of got what the film was trying to achieve, which was like this seamless transition from a backstory leading to the New Hope, i.e. plans to steal the Death Star blueprints, and sort of flawlessly link that into the way that New Hope started. But I personally, it just didn't work for me. I wasn't a massive fan of it, but it by no means was a bad film. It was perfectly enjoyable, and some good characters in it as well. So that's fine. Then Last Jedi came out, and I kind of probably had not high hopes, but I expected it to deliver on certain fronts. I just assumed that it wouldn't be something that Disney would mess up. But I've got to say, I mean, I would go as far as to say this film's a travesty, really. It's not only a bad film, it's almost an offensively bad film. And it's almost, I mean, I don't know anyone who enjoyed the film. I mean, I've got a lot of friends who are sci-fi fans, and they kind of like The Force Awakens, they kind of like Rogue One. They weren't massively blown away by either, but they weren't bad. Last Jedi though it's despised by almost everybody I know, and I despise it. I watched it. I almost stopped watching it because I hated it so much, I have to say. And really what I want to say in this episode, because this isn't really, we don't do film reviews generally as part of this podcast output, but I have to say, I think one thing about this film is, at the moment I'm reading, and I will do an episode about this once I finish reading the book, but at the moment I'm currently about 2/3 into David Icke's latest book, which came out late last year, which is a huge book. It's 700 pages, so it's one of the biggest books he's ever written. I think the biggest he's ever written is The Perception Deception, which came out a few years ago. I think that's 900 pages. I've not read that one. But I will give this new David Icke book a review once I've finished it. So I've got a few thoughts on it. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's very powerful stuff. But there are a few interesting things about this book and the stuff that Icke's talking about, which I think kind of interlink with The Last Jedi. And it all goes back to this movement going on at the moment, which seems to be some sort of concerted effort going on both sides of the Atlantic, all over the world, America, UK, all over Europe, Canada most definitely. And that is this progressive politics agenda, sometimes known as the SJW, Social Justice Warrior Movement. It's got so many different terms for it. It's hard to get a handle on exactly what it is, but Icke's talked about it a lot in his new book, and which is, I forgot the name of it actually, and I have to say one of the things about the book is I don't think it's got a very good title, but that's a minor thing. But it's something along the lines of everything you need to know but have never been told. But in this book, what Icke's saying is he's dedicated whole chapters to the book, to this subject, is that there is this movement at the moment with regards to, there's this sort of drive to push PC political correctness to the point where it basically infests every form of media output and basically erodes freedom of speech right down to the point where it completely is gone, doesn't exist in any form. So not just on the internet, but in Hollywood output and in radio and in television. And it's sort of like progressive fascism essentially. And it seems like this sort of concerted effort to drive out any sense of there being divergent opinion or a dissenting voice. Everyone has to sing off the same hymn sheet, seems to be the agenda. And that hymn sheet may seem, some of it is something that I think we should aspire to as a society. I mean, gender politics is not necessarily something that I disagree with. I think it's very important that we have a culture where everyone has equal opportunities and there is no bias and there is no sense of there being some sort of white man's superiority, any of that. And I'm not saying that any of that's good, but one of the things about the original Star Wars films is, sure, they were basically white men, a white main character, all this business, and sometimes, but that's just how it was. It's as simple as that. And I think that just needs to be accepted that is how it was. But with this new sort of social justice climate that we're in, what seems to have happened now is that we are in a situation where basically The Last Jedi was made in a climate where it's completely unacceptable for there to be a white male character as a lead in any capacity. So it introduced Mark Hamill's character, Luke, i.e. Luke Skywalker, and everyone was really excited to see Luke Skywalker in this film. It turns out that he really didn't have much of a role in the film. In fact, he was almost like this dried up character who had nothing left to give, nothing left to offer. And at first when I watched the film, I thought that was like the cliche of the wise old master who was eventually going to rise and get up off his feet and finally fight at the end. But no, we never really saw that. And instead he kind of passed the baton to Rey, who's the upstart character, the girl who's got sort of this power, somehow unexplainable power. She's got this force, she's got this ability with the force that hasn't really been, it hasn't really been explained why she's got it so strongly, because she's not had any Jedi training, which is one of the flaws of the film. And really that was my biggest issue with The Last Jedi, is Mark Hamill's character was really badly utilised, and he himself has kind of implied in interviews that he wasn't happy with the decision that the director made about that in terms of the script. Rian Johnson, the director, he saw the script and he actually said, I think the quote is something along the lines of, "I fundamentally disagree with every decision you've made about my character," which is pretty damning. Rian Johnson, I don't think, ever really publicly responded to that comment. But I think it's obvious that there was a lot of disagreement on set. And there was actually a screenplay that was made originally by, I can't remember, I think the director's name was Colin Trevorrow. But Disney producers, I think her name's Kathleen Kennedy, who is sort of overseeing the Disney Star Wars films in the capacity of a producer. She did not like the script for whatever reason, and it was redone and a new director came in, and that's where the sort of, I don't know if you can call it conspiracy, I don't know, but that's where this theory comes in, that really what Disney are trying to do with these Star Wars films is push a certain type of political correctness on them, assert this progressive politics into the films, into the canon, and kind of basically re-engineer Star Wars to become this political vehicle that promotes gender equality and promotes various other things. And what you end up with essentially is a film that, sure, you could argue that it achieves that, but to the detriment of a good film with good writing and good plot. It doesn't have any of those things. It's a real mess of a film. It's Luke Skywalker's character, who was the coolest character in all of Star Wars, and certainly the character that everyone wanted to see front and centre of The Last Jedi, was just not utilised very well, really poorly utilised, and that's being, to be honest with you, that's being mildly critical of it. It's more than that, really. But everything else, all the decisions the characters make are really silly. They make no sense. There's really awful plots that go off, subplots with terrible characters. There's this character called Holdol, I think, and she's like this rebel general who comes out of nowhere. I don't think she's been established anywhere in previous books or films. And she's essentially the quintessential feminist social justice warrior, really, with the purple hair. And she's asserting that the male character in it is basically not no good, but kind of a little bit immature and a little bit too gung-ho. So she's sort of asserting her rule and not... and this is very controversial, what's seen in the film, because it's almost like a sort of microcosm of a bigger issue that seems to be happening in society at the moment, which is this battle between the sexes, which is raging. But personally, that didn't quite annoy me as much as just the bad utilisation of Mark Hamill. That was the thing that really did it for me. And Rey's character she's known as, a lot of the criticism that's been thrown at the writing of this film is that Rey's character is sort of like a Mary Sue, which essentially means that she's a character she has no weakness. She has as a character, she has no real flaw. So the problem with that when you write a story is that it's basically just bad writing, because no one's like that in real life. Everyone has a flaw. Everyone needs some sort of weakness that can be probed by an enemy or some other character. And you just don't get that with Rey. She just seems flawless. She's like this ultimate Force Jedi already. And it just makes no sense. And a lot of characters in this film died. And as a result of that, the film ended with no sense of tension or any sense of jeopardy. So as a result of that, you're going into the next film, which will no doubt come out in 2020, I guess. Or no, 2019. And there's no real enemy. Kylo Ren's still in it, but he's basically been defeated already twice by Rey. So he's not really a particularly powerful bad guy in terms of his Force powers. He comes over like a bit of an idiot, quite frankly, as a character. And the actual enemy rebels are just a bunch of idiots, and it's never really been explained why they've got such powerful technology and such a vast army, because it just seems implausible. So everything about the film is just nonsense, really. It hasn't really made any effort to establish any of this in any sort of semblance of reason or order. And say what you would about George Lucas as a filmmaker. A lot of people don't like his output. But whenever he made a Star Wars film, even the really controversial ones like Phantom Menace, there was always a sense of explanation, and there was always a sense of it being plotted out, and it made there was continuity. It made sense, and characters did do things and make decisions that seemed plausible. Even some of the characters that people hated, and that is not what we get with these new Disney Star Wars films. Certainly not The Last Jedi. It really seems to me like it's been hijacked. It was a mainstream film that, yeah, it was conservative politics ultimately in terms of the cast, mostly white characters, mostly men. Not saying any of that's good. It's good to have various characters from all ethnicities, from all genders. All of that's good to have in a film, but it's the minute you start to force that down people's throat and try to assert a certain political sway that it just comes through so blatantly transparent, and that's what you're doing as a filmmaker. And all of the mainstream critics could not stop pining over how great this film was. It almost had universal acclaim, which is outrageous because the film is absolute garbage. And it's not garbage because of the politics. That's only one element. The main element really is because it's just so poorly written, and all of the plots make no sense. All of the decisions make no sense. It just is nonsense, the whole film. I've got 13-year-old nephews that have said much the same, and they're big Star Wars fans. So this isn't about dwelling on previous films. It's about actually understanding what good writing is and good plot. And we live in a world now where people are very savvy. They know what the difference is between a good film and a bad film, a good plot and a bad plot. And we shouldn't have to put up with this crap. And it's frustrating for me, because I think they've unfortunately totally ruined Star Wars. It's so bad, in fact, that, I mean, this is an April Fool's joke, but I saw today in the Express, which is a tabloid newspaper in the UK, they did an April Fool's joke headline here saying, Star Wars 9, J.J. Abrams confirms time travel to right the wrongs of The Last Jedi. J.J. Abrams has revealed time travel will be used in Episode 9 to undo everything the fans hated about The Last Jedi. And some people fell for it, because in the comment section, people are saying, oh, that's great news, etc., blah, blah. But ultimately, it's just basically demonstrating the fact that everyone knows that the backlash about this film is real. There is a lot of hatred for this film, yet the mainstream critics love it. So there seems to be this strange disconnect there between what the critics believe and what the actual fan base believes, and the average moviegoer. And personally, I'm not so sure I can quite go as far as to say that all the critics have been paid off, because that seems a little bit too far-fetched. But what I think it is I think a lot of critics nowadays live in the sphere of this real pressure to be perceived as somebody who's progressive. So they have to go along to get along. So they have to be perceived to be embracing the new politics, embracing the new movement to encourage this sort of filmmaking and this kind of political slant where everything's progressive, whatever that word actually means. And there's an element of virtue signalling going on there as well, where they're loving it because it seems virtuous to love a film that's made these, quotes, progressive decisions, which aren't progressive at all, they're just stupid. That's how I see it. And that seems to be a popular opinion on various I mean, Reddit's I find Reddit's very good, because a lot of the real hardcore fans will go on Reddit and talk about this. And there's been a hell of a lot of debates. So that's that's pretty much really my summary. So I think really all I'm trying to get at really is this film is bad, but it seems to be bad because of a political movement that seems to be conquering all sorts of franchises in Hollywood and on television. And we could end up seeing a bit of a backlash that forces this element of politics to move away from Hollywood. But I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I think this is just the first of many films that are going to have this slant to them. Perhaps even the new Star Wars film that comes out this year, the Han Solo movie, may fall foul of the same problems. But David, like I said, he talks about this openly in his new book, which is a very good book. That's my mini review so far. I've not quite finished it, but I'm finding it very, very powerful. And he talks all about this. There you go. So Last Jedi, I would give that a serious thumbs down as a movie.
The information where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.